Madam Chair, we have- Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the April 10th, 2023 work session of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. This meeting is being held at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, 600 East 4th Street in room 267. For viewing by the public and media, today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. Meeting is officially called to order. We will begin with introductions. My name is Kiba Samuel, and I serve as chair. Mr. Vice Chair.
Philip Gussman, Vice Chair.
And we'll continue moving to the right.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Commission.
Rebecca Wilden, Planning Commission.
Clayton Seeley, Planning Commission.
Douglas Welton, Planning Commission.
Terry Lansdale, Planning Commission.
Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Courtney Rhodes, Planning Commission.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
Rick Winiker, Planning Commission.
And our staff members that are joining us, please.
Alicia Osborne, Planning.
Siobhan Davis, Planning Staff.
Allison Craig, Planning Director.
Candace.
Thank you.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
Happy birthday to you. No, it never is anybody's birthday. So when I start singing,
It actually was on Friday. Candace.
Happy belated. I would also like to acknowledge, we have an elected official in our audience today. Vice Chair of the Vice Chair of the Mecklenburg County Board of County Commissioners, Elaine Powell, has joined us today and is welcome again to be with us among the dais. And I do believe that she has an early departure plan. So thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. I think we'll now move to our agenda. In the first order of business there is to approve the work session minutes from our March meeting or to propose amendments if there are any edits needed.
This is Lansdale. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes and thank staff for the hard work.
Second, Wilden.
Motion by Lansdale, second by Wilden. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimous. As we've been kind of chugging along throughout this calendar year, our focus has been on really just making an effort or making sure that we are applying the appropriate level of consideration to things that impact our work. And that includes a focus on infrastructure. Some of that is in the form of social infrastructure. And so we've heard thus far this year from our team over at Corridors of Opportunity, our team at Housing and Neighborhood Services. Last month, we had Charlotte Fire with us, and today we will hear from our partners at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. Their planning projections is something that should be of high interest to us. And I thought it was a good time as they have a pretty hefty goal and objective plan for the 2023 year. I would like to introduce, I think, Dennis Lacaria, who is a friend of the commission. Mr. Lacaria, it's been about a year at least since you've been before the commission. And he is the facilities and real estate planning manager for CMS, of course, and always welcome here. And he will provide an update on a number that starts with a 3
Close. Close.
2.999999. Thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, everybody, for the time today. And that's okay. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will now attempt to stall for time a little while the technology catches up. So we are in the midst of working on a capital improvement plan for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. If everybody remembers, we had a bond in 2017. That was the last one that passed. Bond referenda are typically 5 years or so in length. And so as we start to deliver the last projects in the bond and spend that bond down, there's an opportunity to ask for new dollars. And so we began the work to do that last May. And so this is the timeline that we've been operating on. So we started last May and we folded in work around our boundary process and our magnet programs into our capital planning, because those things should work together. And also there's a Board of Education policy that says every 6 years we're supposed to do a boundary and magnet review. So it was a good opportunity to align all of that work. As we move through our process with the Board of Education, we made some interim recommendations. You'll see some more about that. And those were adopted and approved by the Board of Education. And some of those have already been implemented or in the process of being implemented. And we went through a pretty robust series of community engagement, and you'll see some more about that in a little bit through fall and winter of 2022 and into the first part of this year. And then in February, we presented our basically our 5-year CIP to the Board of Education on the 14th, had a public hearing, and on the 28th, the Board of Education adopted that. Then there was a joint meeting between the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners, and we shared that information formally with the Board of County Commissioners at that point. And we are moving through the things that we have to do in order to actually secure a bond referendum in November. On the 7th, in the event anybody hasn't yet registered to vote and is interested. So we have to start obviously with the buildings, right? Because if you don't have buildings, you can't offer programs, or you can't offer the program well, you can't get kids out of portables. So recognizing that, again, you know, and I think this is another good primer and a reminder for everybody in the audience, whether they know, but boards of education don't have taxing or funding authority in the state of North Carolina. So we have to ask. We have to ask the county commission, and they're great about supporting us. Then we have to ask the voters, and they're also great about supporting us in order to do the work that we need to do for our students and our staff. There are a whole variety of things that we take into consideration when we're devising a capital improvement plan. And we've bracketed those as assumptions, methodologies, and standards. And so assumptions include things like a 4-block schedule at middle school and high school, because that's the way we do things today. And if we didn't do things like that, then that would mean we'd have to undertake some different planning principles, because it would be a different reality. We do something, the Board of Education does something called student weighted staffing, where additional resources, meaning human beings, are allocated to schools with greater needs, which drives down things like class sizes and increases utilization. We have to assume that that's going to continue to happen through the life of the plan. And so we plan around the utilization and not a student capacity. Methodology is the way that we measure utilization, which comes down to the number of classrooms or teaching stations available versus the number of classroom teachers who require one. The standards take into consideration all of the things that we have to do, because we get treated like every other developer in the city or the county or the towns when we're building there. Plus there are additional requirements that we have from NCDOT and NCDPI, the Department of Public Instruction, that all have to be taken into consideration around what we have to do in order to build a school. And then there are our own standards, like the size of a classroom, the number of classrooms in a building, what we're trying to do for student support spaces, all of those sorts of things. So those get bracketed into those 3 categories, and they get basically formulated. One thing that's important, I think this was something the chair was mentioning, and had another conversation about cost. So Rocky River High School and Huff High School, when we delivered those in 2010, we spent about $51.5 million for each one of those schools. We are building a high school right now at North Community House in Johnston Road, and that same building basically is $130 million. So that's the reality that we're operating in. We're doing nothing substantially different. Still 100 classroom high school, still got the athletic complement, the parking that's necessary, code required things, and that's the price delta right now. As we went through the planning process, we also wanted to demonstrate not only to ourselves, but to the voters that we knew how we were going to accomplish each one of the projects. It also helps us budget more appropriately. So what you see here is the balance of campus replacement at South Mecklenburg High School. So at South Mech, we have made some investments recently in the last couple of bond cycles, and there is another one that is being made today. We want to be able to keep the good and demolish the not so good. And so this balance of campus replacement will allow us to build one other building that will connect these three when it's all said and done, be able to redo all of the athletics, fix the parking, the circulation, and all of those other sorts of things. And so that's a piece of our planning that's gone into each one of the projects that we've done and that we've listed. We also, as everyone here knows, have ranked our projects via a rubric over time, and that rubric has evolved as we've looked at things a little bit differently. And there's a very different lens on facilities in our planning for this particular bond referendum than there ever has been before. And so, you know, in the wake of the 2005 bond failure, which was the last one that had failed for schools, we did a whole lot of work in order to try and regain the community trust, and developing that rubric was a piece of that. But we have really now, since this work for this referendum started in 2020, moved to looking at classroom by classroom, building by building, school by school, the things that actually negatively impact teaching and learning. So where we have classrooms where there's no window, where there's no fresh air, and often those two things go together, and the fan coil unit's also noisy. So then you've got kids in a dark, noisy closet, and we're asking our staff and our students to do their best work in that environment. Those things actually have a deleterious impact on the exchange of information. And so we started first and foremost with the things in our inventory that we know are actually drags on student achievement, because at the end of the day, we are the nonprofit that teaches reading. There's a variety of other inputs that come into the rubric as well. We take into consideration a facility condition index, which speaks to the cost to repair versus replace a facility. Again, those utilization things where we have significant history of open maintenance issues or recurring maintenance issues, of measurement against our baseline standards. So a lot of those schools that I'm talking about that don't have windows, don't have outside air exchange, are also older, and they're also much, much smaller than the schools that we're building today. So we take that into consideration as well, and whether or not the school itself can actually support the curriculum as it's being taught today. So you look here at our current rubric that was used to evaluate these projects. The highest single point total was awarded for educational environment. And so that took into consideration all those factors like daylighting, like what we call Florida style classrooms, which is where a door opens directly to the outside, not even into a hallway, but directly into the outside. And we have those even on some of our elementary school campuses. Current classroom utilization. So not so worried about chasing growth here, looking at the highest over utilization situations we have on the ground right now, because we know we're not going to close 100% of the gap on growth no matter what we do. We've still got over 1,300 portables in operation right now today. Condition takes again into consideration those factors like, is the roof leaking? And life cycle speaks to the actual life cycle of the roof or the components that are installed. Mandates and initiatives are the things that are either done to us or we do to ourselves. So the state of North Carolina says we need you to reduce class sizes K2, and there's no money to do that. So we need to make sure that if we have a project that is necessary to do that, that we're recognizing that if we're standing up a new magnet program or expanding a new magnet program, and there needs to be a capital project tied to that, we want to capture that. Continuity connects multiple projects together or multiple phases on a single campus. And the logistics piece makes sure that they happen in the right order. So B doesn't go before A. And the MCA now, I guess, has been retired, but this was active at the time that we did this project, and that was to recognize those towns that had not sworn off the charter school piece. So the through line on this relative to the educational environment, relative to the utilization pieces, we naturally pick up capacity while addressing conditions. So you take an Allenbrook Elementary School, which has got 28 classrooms, very old, beyond usable life. Replacing that school with a new 45 classroom elementary school not only changes the reality for the staff and the students that are at Allenbrook today, but it also means we can adjust a boundary with Thomasboro, for example, and get some kids out of some portables and put them in brick and mortar classrooms. So one school takes care of two situations. And so that's something that we're leaning on very heavily as we work through all of this. And so when we started last May, we had 125 project 10-year needs. So you hear 10-year plan, long-range facilities master plan, all of those things mean the same thing, capital needs assessment. So at that point, there were 125 projects. And if we could have gotten a check and done them all in the month of May of 2022, it would have cost us $5.25 billion. And this takes into consideration things like a warehouse. We need a warehouse for our food. We do child nutrition, and we don't typically put warehouses on a bond referendum. We don't ask the voters to support a warehouse, but we still need a warehouse. And so that's a capital needs. That's separate and apart from how we would actually fund and accomplish those needs, but we still have to capture all of those needs. As I mentioned in the timeline, there were some interim decisions that were made in August and again in November, and those reopened, repurposed, modified some schools that we have in operation already. And so those were filtered through the plan, because obviously when you open a high school full county aviation magnet at EU Waddell, as we did, that means East Mech's not going to get an aviation magnet. We've already planted a flag somewhere. So those decisions then get filtered through, and we adapt the rest of the plan as we move. So we did our first phase of community engagement in October through November, and these were the events that we held. We did those in person, we did them virtually, we did them at noon, we did them at night, trying to make sure that we could reach the greatest number of people. In addition to the events that we actually held, we were invited to a bunch more. So there were 45 sessions that we were actually invited to attend. League of Women Voters, other groups put on events, and we went to those. We did school sponsored events and some other social engagements to try and get this information out there and get some feedback on that initial list of projects. What we heard was actually pretty good, I think, relative to the support that people had in the community generally. There's a misconception. There's a whole lot of people, this won't surprise you, who just moved here from New Jersey last week, and they don't recognize how school funding works or doesn't work in the state of North Carolina. So being able to explain how things work and why we're in the situation we're in, and the disconnect between planning and catching up to growth and all of those other sorts of things, then people understood the rationale for the ask, and they were generally supportive of our approach and the need for capital investment. We shopped an idea around a regional athletic model, and originally we were thinking about that being in lieu of. So each one of our high schools has a full set of competition facilities. That's football, stadium, track, all of those amenities. And what we were saying was, maybe we need to think about this a little bit differently and start going to a regional model for competition, allow the schools to have what they need just for practice and intramurals and PE, and then actually do competition somewhere else. And there were multiple reasons for that. One is it's really hard to keep up with all of this infrastructure. Two, we've de-emphasized athletics over the years because we've relentlessly pursued brick and mortar classrooms at the expense of pretty much everything else. And so that was a way to solve for that. And then also longer term, the reality of it is we all know we're not making any more real estate. I doubt we're going to be allowed to annex Union County Public Schools at any point in time or move across the South Carolina border. So at some point, it might be 30 years from now, 50 years from now, whoever is doing this job might say, I need an elementary school on Highway 51 and Providence's football field is the only place it can go. So we were also trying to future-proof the district because that's part of long-range planning. What the community said to us, we really appreciate that, great idea, but we want you to do both and. We want you to continue to invest in the high schools individually while you're building out this regional athletic thing. And when worst comes to worst, you'll be in a position to do that. So we've proceeded with that. And then we heard some things about magnets and student assignment. Then we took that feedback and we revised our plan down based on conversations we were having with our funding partners in Mecklenburg County and their staff, and really tried to focus on the projects that we could do primarily complete, if not, start, if not substantially complete over the 5 years that the CIP would cover. And so that got us to a list of 40 projects down from that 125, again, recognizing that we're not asking for the warehouse in this. So a lot of those things get scraped automatically, but really focusing on the things we could start substantially complete over a 5-year CIP. And that was a 2.885 unescalated number. So that had no inflationary factor in it. That was, we get a check that day, we could deliver everything. And this is what those 40 projects would have been. So then January, February, we did more community engagement. We did, again, virtual, in-person, afternoon, evening, trying to do outreach. And then we had 27 additional sessions in that month and a half window that we were invited to attend. League of Women Voters held a second one, for example. So that was 2 that they hosted, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2. And we talked to an awful lot of people, both online and in person. We set up an email box where people could send their comments and their feedback. So we got an awful lot of email as well. And what we heard from phase 2 was there was an appreciation for what we were trying to do with the magnet stuff, but they wanted a slowdown on the community, wanted a slowdown and deeper conversations, deeper dives on some of the magnet changes, really wanting, again, some more engagement on the boundary process, which we've taken into consideration. And again, just general support for our capital needs. We collected common questions. We did an FAQ. It's on the website, so people could get responses to that as well as responding to the emails and the survey piece. And so that drove us to the capital projects recommendation that we took to the board on Valentine's Day. And that narrowed it to 30 projects. And that was really, again, in conversation with our funding partners in Mecklenburg County and county staff around what we could actually not just substantially complete, but really complete within a 5-year window. So start and finish within 5 years, recognizing there's a little bit of a hangover on a couple of these larger campus projects, but generally the focus then 30 projects and about a $3 billion number at that point in time with inflation. So over the life of the 5-year CIP, 6-7 year spend, basically that would be the cost for those 30 projects. We have continued to hone that number. It's a little bit lower than this now, but order of magnitude is still pretty accurate. And so here are the schools that we were looking at, and you'll see more detail on each one of the projects as I step through it, but a variety of projects throughout the county. And an awful lot of things that you'll see on-site replacements. So we have real estate on our site already where we can build a new school, move the kids across the lawn or the parking lot to the new school, and then demolish the old school and finish the site work. We have a handful of off-site replacements, but even with that, we have the real estate. So Allenbrook Elementary School that I just mentioned, we can't rebuild on the Allenbrook site, but we have 55 acres just across Freedom Drive behind the cemetery. So we'll be able to site Allenbrook there, build the new school, move the students over, demolish the old school. So Berry Hill, same thing. We can't build it on the site. County Park and Rec owns some land across the street. We will work out a swap with them, build a new Berry Hill, and there would be a new park on the water. So those are the things that we're working on. So none of this requires the acquisition of additional real estate, because that's another thing that we're very sensitive to, is the fact that the dollars that we have to build buildings, to replace schools, to modernize things is the same pot of dollars that's available to buy land. So we wanted to start first and foremost with the real estate that we already had in hand. And so you see here, Albemarle Road Middle School replacement, Allen Brook offsite replacement, Berry Hill offsite replacement, Beverly Woods onsite replacement. There are 2 multi-school chains that are tied to a Montessori program and 2 paired schools. So decisions were made in 2016 around pairing Cotswold and Billingsville as a homeschool, with one being a K2 and the other being a 3-5, and the same thing happening at Sedgefield and Dilworth. And there's a lot that we like about the paired boundaries, so we want to honor the boundary. What we don't love is a principal driving between 2 schools. What we don't love is sending 2 buses to one house from 2 different schools with the same kids on it. What we don't love is stressing the PTA about the staff appreciation day, where we've got to now do bulletin boards and lunches at 2 schools instead of 1 with the same handful of volunteers. So all of those sorts of things. So honoring the boundary, but building new neighborhood schools that would actually reflect the upper and lower L, and then be able to relocate Montessori schools from buildings that are really egregious. Chantilly, you can't get into the building unless you're able-bodied. The other day I was at the school for a site visit, and the principal had to go to the bottom of the stairs and wait with a stroller so that the mother could go into the office and check the other student out, because you can't get the stroller into the building. So it's pretty bad. These things were built in 1954. They're beyond end of life, and they've got a variety of issues like that. So by doing some Montessori specific renovations to the existing Billingsville and to the existing Sedgefield Elementary School, we can improve the situations for the Montessori schools, expand their capacity, and build 2 new neighborhood schools instead of 2 new magnet schools. Replacing Cochrane on-site replacement of Cornelius, on-site replacement of Coolwood STEM. EE Waddell is basically the same facility as Butler and Hopewell. We've done the other building addition at Butler and Hopewell. We did not do it at EE Waddell, so we would build the additional building to get it to the baseline number of classrooms, and it would also support the magnet program that's going in there. Balance of campus replacement at East Mecklenburg. Another phase of work at Garinger. Garinger's on the historic register, so we can't just scrape it and start over. So we have to be careful as we work through that campus. So this is another phase of work that would give us a new kitchen and cafeteria and some additional classrooms, a new gym that would allow the existing gym to become the auxiliary gym. And then we would reuse the existing kitchen cafeteria for specialty classrooms to support some magnet programs that are coming. Balance of campus replacement at Harding, as well as some new magnet programs that are proposed for there. On-site replacement at Huntersville, another phase of work at J.T. Williams, the conversion of Marie G. Davis to the 712 Montessori High School, on-site replacement of Matthews, a new middle school number 1. We just are under contract on that land down the Cato property down in the Ardrey-Kell area in the community house attendance boundary, Ray Farms attendance boundary right there on the backside of Golf Links Drive. New middle school number 2, land that we own up in Huntersville. New middle school number 3, land that we own down on Steel Creek. The land that we're buying with the Cato property is actually money that was made available to us as a result of the exchange that we did when buying the high school site. So many of you were here. We brought that through. We appreciate all that support. A new second ward high school on the site of the second ward high school today. Balanced campus replacement at North Mech. Northwest School of the Arts, we do another phase of renovation and replacement of buildings there, but we also make it a 912. So part of the challenge with Northwest is running that as a 612, bell schedule tensions, things like that. So First Ward would become a middle school art school. We'll replace University Park on site. That's one of those schools that has the Florida style classrooms I'm talking about. The back building, you open the door and you're looking straight outside. So replacing University Park, renovating First Ward, and then we would have a 3-campus full magnet Charlotte School of the Arts, Northwest being the high school, First Ward being the middle school, and U Park being the elementary. Again, the Park Road, Sedgefield Dilworth combo that I spoke of, replacement of South Charlotte. So South Charlotte is the same middle school as Northridge. We did an addition renovation project at Northridge, but that was before we used the lens that we're using to evaluate our schools. So we said in looking at South Charlotte, we actually need to replace that. That would have been the right call at Northridge. We've made the investment there though, but we will replace South Charlotte. Balance of campus replacement at South Meck, on-site replacement of Steel Creek, off-site replacement of Villa Heights. So as we open the new Second Ward school, we'll move the health sciences program that's there to Second Ward, which will free up the Hawthorne campus for us to replace Villa Heights there and actually have a baseline school. The West Regional Athletic Complex that we spoke about. So there is one regional athletic complex in this list, and then an on-site replacement for Wilson. So the steps, again, the board adopted this 28th. We did the joint presentation to the Board of County Commissioners. County Commission has a meeting tomorrow, public policy workshop to be talking about their budget and the CIP. The LGC has told us they are kicking the can down the road. They'll let us know if they approve the bond after it passes. So that bullet no longer applies, but this was in what was shared earlier. So I wanted to make sure that was there. We will work on an information campaign once we have definition, because the County Commission has not formally accepted our 30 project 2.8 or $2.9 billion ask at this point. So to the extent that something changes there, it's really hard to go out and start doing an information session to tell people what's coming when in fact we don't absolutely know. And then November 7th would be that vote.
Anybody else still thirsty after that water hose? Thank you so very much. I would imagine that we have some questions around the dais, and I think I'll start off with just one somewhat of a level setting question. How involved to date has County Commission been in the planning process and these projections? And I think the real question I'm trying to get at is, do you anticipate them requesting any changes to either the number of projects, the style of the projects, the delivery of the projects, the number, the dollar ask? Are you anticipating any changes, and how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there have been plenty of conversations with, with the boards. We've had the joint session, plenty of conversations with staff. I spoke to the county chief financial officer just this morning. So we're in very, very close communication and collaboration. We're trying to refine our numbers and get sharpen the pencil a little bit as we move through this process. I would not anticipate, I think the county commission fully understands and is supportive of their role, which is to tell us how much, right? And not to cherry pick a project, not to weigh in on what should or should not be on the list. But obviously they do have work to do relative to our ask, the support that they need to give to Park and Rec and CP and the library system and the sheriff and what they're trying to do with community resource centers and all of those sorts of things. And we understand and appreciate, I guess, that all of that tension. We're just cautiously optimistic because there's a variety of different things that have yet to be worked out, including the way the funding works, right? So with selling debt, there are premiums and preferences that could be available. So that could mean that there's a little bit more money available than the debt that's sold. We could talk about a variety of different things if push comes to shove, but we're hopeful. So far, the tenor of the conversation's been very positive and supportive. And so we're right now just remaining stubbornly optimistic.
Well, thank you for that additional context. The rubric that you discussed in the presentation, and I don't want to misquote, did that identify priority or just evaluate projects?
So it's an evaluatory tool, right? It creates the problem statements,
Okay.
right? It doesn't tell you how to solve them. It says Chantilly's bad, So Chantilly goes to the top of the list, doesn't tell you how to fix Chantilly. So again, that's where staff intelligence and applying, looking at the fact that we didn't want to build new magnet schools. We wanted to build new neighborhood schools. So prioritizing that, but we did want to address the situation that we had at Chantilly, and we had these other opportunities because just with Dilworth and with Cotswold and those pairs, Cotswold also needs to be replaced. Dilworth is not a great facility for little kids because it's 4 levels and your K1 kids have to be on ground floor at all times. So we don't own a lot of real estate. The county owns most of the real estate, so you can't just put trailers out there. So looking at those things, we have this opportunity because of those paired boundaries to collapse those student populations into one building, demolish Cotswold, rebuild it. So we have a new Cotswold neighborhood school, take that paired boundary over there, and then move Chantilly into Billingsville once we've made some modifications to support the Montessori program. Similarly, by moving everybody who's currently in the Sedgefield Dilworth facilities into Dilworth temporarily, demolishing the Park Road Montessori school, building a new neighborhood school on the Park Road site, and then repurposing Sedgefield for the Montessori school. So again, we're building new neighborhood schools, keeping the boundary and solving for the problems that we have at Chantilly and Park Road that way. But it just says Chantilly's a problem, Park Road's a problem.
Okay. So now here's a real question between the rubric, between the staff analysis, and I think you actually just verbalized, there is a hierarchy in which these projects will be done because of the trickle effect. Do you have that? Or are you not putting a cart before the horse?
Well, we have basically the way we would like to accomplish the projects, but we also recognize that as the county is doing what they're doing for their spend, because they're trying to accomplish a constant spend. They want to know that they're spending, I'll make up a number, $500 million a year on all of their capital debt. All of the things that they're working on, Park and Rec, library, all CP, all those CMS that I've talked about, we're fitting those things together to stay under that limit, whatever that is. And so some things will necessarily shift a little, but there are clearly some preceding projects that need to go first in order. We have to have Second Ward built in order to demolish Hawthorne to replace Hawthorne with the new Villa Heights School. So there are things that have to happen in a certain order.
Thank you. Hands raised for questions. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Rhodes, move over to Wilton, Lansdale, and Harvey. In that order, please.
Thank you, Dennis, for that presentation. I'll say I have a lot of kids, so my kids have gone to a few of those schools, and I can attest that I'm glad to see them on the list. They no longer go there. For example, Northwest, my son was in middle school there. It was a challenge to have the middle school and the high school, and I love to see that you guys are incorporating the elementary school. So kudos to those projects. I have a larger question from a zoning perspective. And I know that Commissioner Johnson always brings this up. And I think people always say, well, you're not on the school board, so it's not really your issue to think about. But it really is from a zoning perspective. We're building like crazy right now in the city. And a lot of the projects are multifamily homes. And the issue that we have with the neighborhoods is, hey, that's going to overpopulate the high school. How are you guys from a zoning perspective taking a pulse of what's going on with the building versus what's going on with the school populations? Is there any plan on you guys' end to say, all right, we're going to kind of forward think instead of doing 45 classrooms, which fits the model for the current population, we're going to do 50 classrooms. Then that way that would take into account for the next 200 plus kids that could come into this area. For example, I live in the Mallard Creek area. My son goes to Mallard Creek, and they're already, I think, well over 25. It's 2,500 students, I believe. Pretty nice size school, but there's tons of developments that we've approved that are multifamily. So how are you guys taking all that into consideration?
So the challenge is, and that's a totally fair question. I mean, and it's something that we grapple with, but what we're trying to build is for our desired state, because let's just pretend, so like right now, East Meck has 147 classrooms, and that's only because we haven't demolished some of the older stuff that's been replaced. And so as we finish this balance of campus, we'll be back in that 100 classroom range that we say is our standard for high school. And the reality for that is, if we went ahead and said we're going to build a 150 classroom high school, we're going to have 5,000 kids at that high school. The baseball team didn't get any bigger, right? There's only so many kids who get to be in the school play. So there's only so many human beings you can ask one person to manage, because it's not only the 5,000 students, it's the 500 staff members, it's the parents of all of those students, right? All of those things that go on around a school. So you wind up disenfranchising kids, you wind up costing them opportunities, and you wind up really stressing an administration trying to do that. So that's the challenge. So what we're trying to do is build what we think is the best thing as quickly as we can build what we think is the best thing, and also look for other opportunities like the early college that we opened up at CPCC this fall, like Second Ward, where it's not a traditional high school, like Northwest. And because if Northwest can be a 9-12 school and only high school kids, right? Now we have additional capacity for 9-12. So like trying to figure out other options for kids to opt into something that doesn't even necessarily look like a comprehensive high school, to help manage all of those pressures. But it really comes down to, once you bake the bad in, you don't ever get out of that. And that's the thing that we're constantly struggling with.
Can you spend about 20 seconds, if that's even possible? And this may help Commissioner Rose's question as well, in explaining what goes in your projections for student population growth.
Yeah, so we have a nominal student capacity for each one of our buildings, but the utilization is really the key. And the reason for that, and there was a gentleman on the county commission years ago who used to carp about half empty schools on the west side. Well, if you've got 2 10 classroom schools, just imagine that, right? And School A has a 10-to-1 student teacher ratio because of student weighted staffing, and School B has a 20-to-1 because there is no student weighted staffing. School B's got 200 kids, School A's got 100 kids, but they've both got 10 teachers. So the schools are full. So it's really about looking at the number of staff members versus the number of classrooms, and not because with student weighted staffing, those things change every year. We evaluate, Title I gets set every year. So SES is something that we're looking at constantly. So those things can change even within a school year over year. So in order to really accurately reflect and project, we stand on what's happening from a staffing level, not from a student level.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. I don't have kids, but I do have a lot of nephews and they're adorable. So I had one question that I'm just kind of gonna like lump in, or 2 questions I'm gonna lump into one. Has building efficiency been taken into consideration in terms of the building of new schools, which will in turn save CMS millions of dollars over the course of 1 year? And will there need to be road reconfigurations?
So I'll do the second one first. So we always have to do a traffic impact study whenever we're building a school. So whether we're replacing a school, building a new one, that's always a factor. And so we always deal with those things case by case. I would assume, yes, we will continue to build sidewalk and put in traffic lights and do all those other things that we need to do in order to open our projects and conduct kids safely to and from school, hopefully not just by their car or their parents' car, right? Walking is great. We have these big yellow things that will come to your house. Like, there are other ways to get to school. So we want all that taken into consideration. So every one of our schools is LEED certifiable. We hung the plaque at Pineville Elementary School. We did nothing different there. because it's an expense, right? So doing the things that we have to do to prove that you did the right things is an added expense. And people are already a little frustrated with the $3 billion ask. So saying I need it to be 3.2 so I can get another plaque, that's really a tough challenge for us to stand on. So we do reduce, reuse, recycle. All of our schools are Energy Star certified, everything that we're delivering now. So we're very confident and comfortable that we're doing the right thing for the right reasons. We're just not doing some of the stuff that some folks would do to prove that we've done those things. But that's absolutely something we take into consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. This is the Charlotte Mecklenburg Planning Commission, and we've done this thing around here, 2040 plan. And one of the first goals on that is this 10-minute community notion. I was kind of struck when you put up your rubrics that there was nothing there that said how accessible a school was to kids. Gospel According to Douglas says that schools are great if more than 50% of the kids can walk to the school. And that seems like something that was kind of missing from the presentation. And I didn't know if you guys considered that at all.
It's something that we consider in the siting. So again, if we had all of the dollars that we needed and wanted at our own timeline, there'd be an elementary school every quarter mile. You wouldn't be able to go a quarter mile without passing another elementary school. We wouldn't have kids in any trailers, and every one of the schools would be what you're talking about. But because we're not in control of our own financial destiny, we have to deal with the most egregious situations that we have first. So then when we're selecting a site, obviously we look first for elementary schools to be embedded in the rooftops. We'd much prefer the high schools to be, out on a commercial drag because we know what the impacts are. But connectivity is something we're always looking at. We work very well with Mecklenburg County on greenway connections and things like that. You'll see the Windsor Park relief that we're bringing online has new green. Not something that we statutorily we deal with what's on our site and then whatever folks tell us to do. So and now with the change in the law, the departments of transportation even have to reimburse us for things that we do off site if they're required to open the school. So it's very, very hard for me to assess a school priority based on something that is up to others.
Thanks, Mayor, our chair, for putting me towards the end here because my questions are all getting taken by other members of the commission. So yeah, I appreciate that. I think you answered a little bit about how the relationship of community growth versus CMS growth. I think I kind of see through the language to get that. I'd like to kind of follow up on efficiency a little bit. I do understand that, about the adding the extra on the front end to build something when you're really just trying to get something in the ground. We have that philosophy on how we build roads. If I can just get a lane down, nothing else matters. I want to be careful of that. So when we talk about efficiency in our schools, it's my estimation, I think on budgets for CMS, that we're spending almost $30 million a year in electric costs for the schools that we build today. As an author of the Strategic Energy Action Plan, we want to see at the time when it's economically most viable to enter these public-private partnerships to get solar, to get on-site revenue by electricity and energy generation. We see all these open campuses as great opportunities. So want to make sure that we're understanding the impact of making the right design decisions now, so that we can have a lowered or more equitable cost structure after the buildings get built. So I want to make sure that I understand that we're making our buildings as not just LEED certified, but as close to net zero energy creation as possible. That can be in how we use the federal dollars to purchase school buses, that become energy generation units while they're not being used during the day, to having solar panels on all flat surfaces and parking lots, et cetera. So really want to understand how we can work with our energy monopoly locally to capitalize on long-term revenue. There's not really a question in there, but if I did have to ask a specific question of you, is that if this all happened and you got through, the community had absolutely no opposition to any decisions you have to make about any of the dominoes that you've set up, what numbers are you going to be asking the state and our county to do for non-personnel revenue for these types of facilities moving forward? Are you looking to increase your electricity budgets by 10%, 30%, 100% if we built out these facilities the way we imagine them?
So, yeah, it's a fair question. I think because a lot of the things that we're taking offline are really energy inefficient, I think we're going to pick up some net gains. Like, it's just not operating a steam plant's not great, right? I think we can all agree with that. So we're going to be taking some of those things offline and replacing them with much more modern, stable infrastructure. So I don't think it's necessarily a gross plus up. So taking a lot of the stuff that we're talking about offline, where we still got 2 pipe boiler chiller operations and things like that, will actually, I think, help with some of that. I think to your point, we need a partner, right? Because that's our challenge. Like, we're all in on those opportunities, but at the end of the day, again, we're not a utility provider. We're that nonprofit that teaches reading. And so we need help. And there are things that we can't tap into, rebates and tax credits and all those sorts of things that aren't available to us. So having a partner that is willing to work with us and help us get those things on our sites, on our schools, we're all about that. It's just really hard to again, justify the plus up and also recognize that our core mission is our core mission, and that's what we've got to focus on first, unfortunately. And again, if we were in total control of our funding destiny, if there were other things that were ours to play with that were fungible, because I mean, just to level set, like, I was the general manager of Sundance Power Systems, North Carolina's oldest renewable energy company in the early 2000s. Like, I'm all in on the renewable piece. We're doing a solar domestic hot water system at the Bruns Avenue replacement right now, so we can see how that works. But again, it's really hard to justify, because if I say, I'm sorry, Allenbrook, we're not getting to replace you on this bond because we're doing solar at Mallard Creek High School, I just don't know how we do that.
Thank you.
First question, well, kind of 2 questions, and following up on Commissioner Rhodes. What I think I heard you say is that it's a staffing, I guess, issue, and there's some consideration for planned growth, but do we have a realistic and/or achievable, integration of a hiring plan to now consider some of the growth that we see on zoning? Because kind of one without the other, I mean, to say that we want to increase the number of classrooms, if we don't have any integration of how we're going to hire new staff and or teachers, then how achievable is planning for the future?
Right. And so the hiring piece is something different. From a planning perspective, we plan based on our student weighted staffing, which then tells us what the staff number is. So it tells us at school A, it's 1 to 13, and at school B, it's 1 to 25. And that's what we filter through, not a number of students. So we don't say we're planning for an 800 student elementary school. We say we're planning a 45 classroom elementary school. And the day the 46 teacher shows up, we have a problem. And so we plan according to when the 46 teacher is going to show up. Right. So it's less about when 823 kids are here, we need a new classroom, and more about now I have 46 teachers. So that from a planning perspective, we're dealing with the staffing rather than the student capacity of the building. So staff utilization. So what you'll hear is that school is 123% utilized. Well, that means I got 23% more teachers than I have places for them to teach. So that's a prioritization schema. That's separate and apart from, yes, we need to hire all the teachers we can get our hands on and keep them. So
thank you.
Okay, so we've gone through the first round of questions, and I think actually we haven't. We have 2 more commissioners who are waiting. I don't see any more hands raised. We can go down this road forever and ever, amen, and still have 50 more questions, Mr. Lucaria. So I'm going to encourage our commissioners, for those who will still be thinking about this presentation and the questions that are not necessarily fitting for this particular presentation, but Mr. Lucaria might be the best to answer. Let's gather those and send those in a follow-up email. In the meantime, I have Commissioner Seeley and Blumenthal.
So I'll make mine quick. It's kind of picking off of what Commissioner Welton was asking about with 10-minute neighborhoods. I see quite a few urban schools on that list. Second Ward, First Ward, Dilworth, Hawthorne. One thing that is kind of ubiquitous nationally, except in the larger urban cities, is land use of these schools. Is there plans to shrink footprints, to vertically integrate projects a little bit more? Like when I think of rebuilding Hawthorne, that is one of the more suburban campuses out there in what is becoming a very urban neighborhood. So I would just love a little more insight, because that really piggybacks off that 10-minute conversation, but it also opens up, you see faith-based institutions like Apex, was it Sharon Methodist, better integrating their campuses. Is there that type of planning for CMS as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the first piece, I think, just to hit on with Second Ward and First Ward, we recognize that there aren't a bunch of rooftops that back up to those. And so that was very intentional that those be selected as countywide magnets, because there's an amount of walkability and we have a proximity zone. So anybody who lives within a third of a mile of a full magnet school gets a preference in the lottery. So we can take that into consideration. But where we don't have a bunch of rooftops, that's really a great opportunity for bringing other people in and trying to create a diverse urban school environment. So that's why you see Second Ward being a full magnet. Relative to our elementary schools, I would love for this to be Midtown Manhattan and us to build 8-story elementary schools, but state of North Carolina says pre-K, K, and first grade kids have to be on ground level at all times, as do all of the spaces they touch with immediate access to the outdoors. So that's the media center, the cafeteria. So it tells you how big your footprint is. And you could go 4 or 5 stories, but you could have 2 empty stories and a bunch of trailers because you've got a bunch of kindergarten kids, right? So that's one of those things that's intention, but definitely for our middle school, our high schools, the new high school that we're opening at Community House Johnson Road, it's a 4-story classroom building. So that's the first one that we've done intentionally in the last, 100 years. So we are absolutely looking at ways that we can contain those footprints and be more urban in our design, even when we're embedded in a neighborhood. So all of those things are there. It's just recognizing that there are sometimes some really obtuse sort of tensions, because the state writes the rules for the 95 rurals, not for the 5 urban counties. So
Thank you.
I'll keep this quick as well. We had a few mandatory referrals within, I don't remember exactly what month, right? Within the last 6 to 9 months that came through with CMS. So any update as to kind of where those are in process? Have they gone through the upset bid process? Kind of where do those funds then become allocated? Is that towards projects like these? And then are there any more in the pipeline that we should be expecting?
Sure. So the opportunity there is to solve for the things we can't put in the bond referendum. So that's the reason for disposing of some of these properties, is we do need that warehouse. We're not going to put that on the bond. I don't know how big of a bake sale we'd have to hold to raise enough money to build a warehouse. So being able then to take those dollars, because they can only be used for capital. So selling the real estate, those dollars can only be used for capital purposes, and reallocating those to our administrative and support needs. It's CMS has not built an administrative facility from the ground up, not built an administrative facility since 1992. So we have to address these things. And so those are the opportunities there to do that. And so we're very close, I think, on the historic property conveyance. Several others are moving through rezoning process, which they will need some definition on to be sure that they can pay the dollar that they committed to pay to us. So as those issues get resolved, then we would be looking to move those to upset bid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, I think you said there's a 6-year boundary realignment time period? Is that by the state or is that CMS?
That's Board of Education policy that they review student assignment every 6 years. So we're kind of in that right now. And we've got a high level look at some things. We're going to be talking to the board about their policy. We've had a pretty substantial change in the makeup of the Board of Education. So we want to check in with the new members, make sure the policy is still good. And then we'll carry that stuff forward. But we're right now in the process of drawing a boundary for the new high school and the middle school down on the Cato property. So that's what's going on right now.
Thank you. And I think that will end the question for this particular visit.
Happy to come
But
back.
we will likely have some follow-up questions if you could, just whenever you have a chance. I can imagine what your schedule is like, so I appreciate any consideration.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Lucaria. And with that, we are at the top of the 1 o'clock hour or just after. And I will now first recognize Allison Craig as the new Charlotte Planning Director. So officially, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. And please tee up what we'll hear from Catherine today.
Sure. Thank you. This will be a really brief update. So, I mean, we're be coming to you on a regular basis. It's really just talking about where we are with the workshops, which we really just launched. And again, it's an ask to please let everyone know that they're occurring. Please spread the word, be ambassadors. I believe we're going to be going to full council here in a couple weeks to also spread the word there. And then talking about how we can engage our county commissioners as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for some of the time on the agenda today. Last month when I was here, the meeting was prior to our first workshop. So we spent a lot of the time talking about what the workshop setup would be, or the format would be, and the types of questions we would be asking. As a reminder, the intent of the workshops throughout 2023 are to collect feedback that will inform potential place type refinements. And those are the categories that organize patterns of development on our policy map. Throughout the workshop, we are using a series of value-based questions and some spatial questions to collect this feedback. So since then, we had our first workshop. We started in the West Middle Geography. We held a virtual meeting on March 28th and 2 in-person workshops on the 30th and April 2nd at Tuckasegee Recreation Center. The content went as expected. Logistics worked according to plan. The attendance was low considering our goal for attendance, but the conversations were really meaningful. So as we debriefed as a team, one of the key takeaways for us was that these conversations are confirming and are reaffirming what we have heard both during the comprehensive plan development and the policy mapping effort. And that is essentially, we are continuing to strive to be equitable by improving, access to housing, jobs, and goods. At the root of it, that's really what we're trying to accomplish and are some of the biggest needs for the community. So we are going to also, Madam Chair, thank you for supporting us. We appreciated your attendance and participation. And today, participants of those workshops will be receiving a follow-up email. Within that, we have a link to the digitized content. So we're going to ask them to help us promote, what we shared in those workshops, and that content will be available through the rest of the year. So people can participate online if they weren't able to join us. So moving forward, our West Inner Geography will be next. We have those workshops scheduled for April 18th. That will be our virtual session. And then April 20th and 22nd will be in person at the Stratford YMCA. We are personally calling neighborhood leaders this week to try and, recruit some more participation and attendance at these workshops. We would, as the director mentioned, love your support in promoting these both socially and maybe email through your networks. We have all those resources available in the toolkit at our project website. We have help posting door hangers or yard signs. That was done for the West Middle geography, but we'll continue to allocate resources to do that for West Inner. And as a final reminder, if you're interested in helping us facilitate, we ask that you sign up for the West Inner workshop through the link that was shared last month. We can resend that, and that will require a training on April 13th at 1 p.m. So that's the update that I have. I'm happy to take any questions or hear any comments.
Thank you, Catherine. Brief but important update on community area planning. I think that for those of you who have already shared information about this event, either by word of mouth or through your social networks, I will say thank you. For those who have not yet, I do feel that we have a level of responsibility in promoting these events to ensure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in. We can be a vessel to improve attendance at these events. And that is something that we agreed to do at our retreat. So I would encourage you to, at least on a weekly basis, share some of the content that's being shared by the planning department through their Instagram, Twitter, or actually Facebook's not.
Instagram.
I think that City of Charlotte has shared information on this effort through City Speaks. And if you have not yet enrolled or subscribed to City Speaks, please do so. It's basically a weekly, not weekly, monthly. Is it a monthly newsletter? I can't remember the frequency of the newsletter, but it's basically sent out by Charlotte government, and it informs general public on initiatives such as this. We have made requests for council members to share. We have made requests for Board County commissioners to share information. As Catherine has said, we've shared this with different neighborhood groups and different advocacy groups like Black Political Caucus. And so we'll continue in those efforts. But I do think that 1, 2, or 5 people sharing this is not as effective as all 14 of us sharing this information. So please connect. Do we have any questions? I'm sorry, I do want to make one other, Catherine just mentioned it, but I want to make sure that commissioners have a full understanding. So we do know that we will be in workshops at least once a month, sometimes twice a month in these different geographies. And what is required in order for us to help facilitate these workshops is we have to be in the training that happens immediately before the virtual workshop. So say, for instance, April 21st.
The first workshop, well, the West Inner Tuesday workshop is April 18th. So that's a Tuesday. If you go back the Thursday prior, we're always going to do the Thursday prior to the Tuesday virtual.
Okay. So if you're planning to attend the workshops in August, let's just say that August 15th is that date for the virtual workshop. The Thursday before will be the training session. If you're not in that training session prior to that series of workshops for that geography, you won't be able to help facilitate. Of course, you can participate, but to help facilitate, you have to go through the training that staff is providing a few days before each week of workshops.
And the why is that the content is unique for that geography, right? So if you come to a workshop, you might be familiar with the format and think you can wing it. I'm not questioning anybody's ability. It's just that the content is specifically designed for each geography. And so it really helps to have some time to look at the content with staff and talk about how you want to set up the conversation and what kind of questions you're looking to draw out of, or answers draw out of the community. So that's the why, if it helps.
Okay, and Commissioner Gusman has a question.
Thank you. And just to reiterate to everybody and ask of staff that if you could just help make sure that we get the notification of the trainings with a little bit of time so that we can, I understand we'll try and lay out our schedules now. But please keep that dialogue coming and let us notify us of those trainings. The first one kind of hit me as a surprise. I was unable to fit it in and ended up I was going to be out of town anyway. So it was like, all right, that's not working. We need to, I just want to make sure that we're getting, I know how it is. It gets busy. Everyone's time gets precious. And you might think you can't make it, but we need to get the reminders that we are.
So here's a question, because I was struggling with this. I know we all have a lot of meetings on our calendars, and reminders can also can be a bit frustrating at times if you're not going to that meeting, but would a reminder now be helpful for all future dates? And then
I think that's a unanimous yes.
All right.
Yeah,
Cut out now.
Crowd the calendar. We'll sort it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, okay.
it wouldn't bother me if you sent one once a month and just said, these are our engagements. And, you know, and from the whole planning department, send one once a month that said, these are our engagements. So we would know which things we had to hit. You know, there's a fine balance between too much and too little. Once a month is generally acceptable to me. I don't know if I'm freakishly unperturbable.
I'd
Or
say
not.
you are. Okay. Once a month, we can definitely.
Any other questions for Catherine?
Thank
Thank you. We are at 120. Commissioners Winiker, Neely, Weldon, can you please provide an update on work program regarding guiding documents?
Yeah, we'll do that. And there's a slight disconnect. Last month, everybody in your packets, you got a thing that said, here's some rules of procedure suggested changes, and here's some interlocal suggested changes. And we were ready to present those at that point in time. We didn't get to that last month. Had sent the same notes out and wanted to get that to you guys, but there's a disconnect. And so you didn't get it this month as well. But what I will do is to summarize that what we wanted to do, there are two documents that we're dealing with here. One being the rules of procedure, which is the Planning Commission's own stuff, how we play this party, how we make this work, where the magic happens, so to speak. And we can change those rules at any given time. We had suggested probably about 10 changes to those. And those are on a document, which we will get to you after this meeting. And those being things like the date on which we meet. For those of you who've been on the commission for more than since this fall, we used to meet on the first Monday. The actual date is in the rules of procedure that we're supposed to meet. So we need to change that. There are things, for instance, like a quorum is set to a specific number, 8. Should that be majority plus 1? We just wanted to get some feedback from you guys. And, you know, that one's like, oh, kind of makes sense, except of course, for those 3 or 4 months when all of a sudden we don't have 3 people and that gets kind of wonky. We have a standing committee for environmental stuff, Madoodle. And, you know, the rules of procedure establishes 4 committees, 2 of which, when I read out loud, people didn't know we actually had. So what we want to do is to provide a general rule that allows the executive committee to create subcommittees that can last, long-lasting, things of that nature. And those are the types of rules. I think the last one change that we suggested was that every year when we have our retreat, let's look at the rules and take 10 minutes to say up or down on things that we want going forward, and have it be a document that we deal with routinely. And so those were the types of changes. And again, when you see those changes coming to you in this document, I hope that you will say, oh, those make sense, and we can get the exact magic, good words and include those in the document. And then what we will do is we will simply have a vote on that, hopefully next month or something like that. The interlocal agreement is a bigger bear in that it is an agreement between the city of Charlotte, the city council and the county commissioners in terms of governing parties as to how this board shall be. Do not talk with your hands. And we had a number of changes that we had suggested there. Because those changes require both of those governing bodies to approve the changes that we would make. Those are kind of a long ball kind of a game. We had worked with the city's attorney, Therese Hagler Gray, to say, here are some things that we would like to change. The last conversation Sean and I had with her, she said that most of the all of the things that we had proposed as a change, and those are on the document that you guys received, those were things that would be valid for us to request as a change. Exact legalese, whether we should say should or shall or would or wow, when one of those things, that should be something that that's why they pay her the big bucks. And that we would get back to her and we would get exact language. If you guys agree that those are things that we would want to pursue as a change, we can again, because unfortunately the document's not in front of you guys, you'll be able to say, yes, these are things that we'd like to change. These are things that we think maybe you shouldn't proceed with. But we have run all those things by Therese and basically gotten a thumbs up from her. And then once things go to city council and county commission, that is a whole nother animal. And, it may take a while to get it on their agendas. They may see opportunities to put other stuff in there, et cetera, et cetera. It could be gloriously effective and we could get everybody to do this all in 1 month, or, maybe not. So that's where we are with our work.
Okay, so I think Commissioners Blumenthal, Wilden, and Russell, I'm sorry, have been working on work program item numbers for our environmental and sustainability issues. And the current iteration of that is that one bullet point in that work program was moved out and created a new work program item. I don't know if we need to officially, we made a motion and adopted or voted unanimously to create an additional work program item to see an updated work program for publishing purposes first. But this new work program item number 7 is the checklist that you all saw. It was included in the agenda packet, if I'm not mistaken, last month. I won't provide an update there, but I will say to Commissioners Winokur, Neely, and Welton that the series of events that have evolved as a result of work program item number 7, I am officially requesting that your suggested changes first come to executive committee. And since executive committee meets a week from today, if you could get that document sent out today, I think it's in a ready form. And I think in our last executive committee meeting, I asked for, or at least express a preference for a red line version of this is what's current, red line, these are the suggested changes for both of those documents. So we can really look and see, and again, highlight any other opportunities for additional feedback. So if those documents can go to executive committee fairly immediately after this meeting, that would be greatly appreciated, preferably, or at least some iteration of that no later than tomorrow, whatever your current iteration is of that. We will have discussion on that document in executive committee. And then hopefully, after that discussion, decide which comes to this body in May. The series of meetings that we've had with now planning director, planning staff, city attorney, county commission, both offices of sustainability and resiliency has caused or has resulted in changes to the document that I think we all feel good about, but we have to ensure the most effective way for all parties to be comfortable moving forward with. And so we're close. I will allow Commissioner Blumenthal to, or the two commissioners present, to share on that specific work program item, which is now number 7, newly adopted. But I just wanted to give that context and explanation as to why that now I think it has to come before executive committee first. There were some, not necessarily setbacks, but just some things that we learned in that process that I think it'd be worthy for executive committee to discuss before bringing it to the body. So I'm officially making that request.
Yeah, that's fine. Just, it was just one of these. And so we'll get you that immediately.
Many thanks. Wilden and Blumenthal, please.
I would agree with that. As far as coming to executive committee first, I think one thing that we learned first and foremost is that you need to be incredibly explicit as to the intent of everything that you're doing, because if there's any room for gray area, you're going to open up Pandora's box, and I promise you that we don't want to go back there. We had meetings with several people, like our new planning director, Tari as well. I think that we are kind of in the process now of waiting on some additional feedback on the rezoning considerations list that we put forward. One of the things that we're working on, just so that everyone's aware, and hopefully with the assistance of Laura Harmon, is to try and tie each of those individual pieces into specific components of the UDO. Just to, again, make very explicit where it's coming from and how it's relevant to the work that we do. We are also waiting on Therese' final go-ahead as to our process and how, I guess, the intent of the rezoning considerations in order to ensure that, to the best of my knowledge, to ensure that we're not stepping on any toes, right? And to make sure that what we do remains consistent with the purview of the Planning Commission. So as far as timing, frankly, ball is in their court. I believe that, each of those parties has the most updated and relevant redline version of the document, and kind of waiting on their feedback in order to to readdress it on our end. Initially we were hoping to be able to have an adoptable version by today. And now obviously we're looking at least 1 month out, and I hope it's only 1 month out. But again, I know everyone's busy and want to be cognizant of that. So once we have kind of a revised version, we have the legal go ahead, and we have the revisions that tie the individual points to the UDO, we'll send that back around, and it'll go to executive committee, after which we'll send it around to the full commission. And hopefully we have something that is adoptable at that point. But again, I think, and I'm not being critical here, I think that just to be very explicit about the intent of each of these documents, what we want to accomplish, and subsequently how it will be implemented is very important, because again, a lot of people have a lot of, I guess we all have people to report to, and we want to make sure that we don't step on any toes there. Becca, do you have anything to add? Okay, I think that's it.
I didn't mean for that to be daunting or raining on anybody's parade by any means. I think that the one thing that I will say in all of these meetings and all of these conversations, that we all have the same goal, which is to adopt this document. Again, just making sure that the path to adoption is as smooth as possible, as future-proof as possible, also keeping in line with some level of malleability for the future. So the one thing that I will say is that I have loved the attention that this document has gotten already. The word is spreading, and it's not me this time. It's not me. I have not put this in a public space, but when I approached Office of Resiliency and Sustainability on both sides, they already knew that we were working on this thing. And so it's a good thing that it's getting attention already. That does definitely mean that people think that we should be in this space, and that they're looking forward to what we present. So having said that, I look forward to and very thankful for Allison and Laura specifically and her team for allowing time to really comb through the document to assist us in aligning certain parts with UDO. So as fast as they can work and turn around that document for us, we will get it into the hands of, and I think because it's gone to executive committee already, Blumenthal, I don't think it will need to return there. It'll just return to this body. And hopefully the hope is, because you got to put it out in the atmosphere, right? The hope is that our next meeting is May 8th. And my prayer is that we have this document back from Laura and team prior to the holiday. I'm sorry, prior to the end of the month, so that we can get you guys the document, or at least get it back to subcommittee for them to lay eyes on it, get it to this body. And I will request, when it comes to you, please, really, really quickly. And as I've talked to a few of our commissioners, some of you had feedback that is very valuable that you've been holding on to. I won't call any names, but they're sitting on my right side. But don't hold on to any feedback. This is a 14-person document. I'm sorry, 13-person document. I have a note on that in just a second, but at this time, it is a 13-person document. Yes, 3 people are specifically taking comments from 14 different people and condensing it into this work. But I want to make sure that you all know that the expectation is that we all contribute to the document, because when it's adopted, it is a planning commission adopted document. Okay, and I just wanted to press some importance there. And
one quick thing to add, Allison, is, and I speak for Becca and myself as well as Will, that if we can assist in that process, because again, I know that, you know, we were the ones who initially put all that together. If we can help facilitate, expedite, whatever, let us know. I believe you were copied on all the emails as well. So I know Laura's not here with us today, but please relay that to her as well, that to the extent that we can be helpful, please let us.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah.
And with that, I would like to hear from Commissioner Lansdale. Commissioner Lansdale, as you all know, is our appointment to CARPO. And I asked him to present to us a little bit of information on some things that should be on our radar, and share with us any transportation related topics, initiatives, and FYIs that would be privy for the body to hear. So please, Commissioner Lansdale.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll keep this short, and I'll try my best not to use too many acronyms, but there's going to be some avoidable ones. The main conversation right now that's on a specific timeline for NCDOT and for the federal government allocation of dollars to North Carolina is what they call the Strategic Prioritization Office of Transportation, the SPOT process. In that SPOT process, every 2 years, DOT is required to do an evaluation and prioritization of projects submitted to them. And that is called a P 7.0 is what we're looking at. And we've gone through P1, P2, P3, all the way through P7. But as you may know, 2 years ago, NCDOT was faced with the MAP Act and paying fines associated with not providing fair market value to property. And as was said earlier, in a great turn of phrase, baking in bad and how they built roads, and had to pay a huge fine that impacted their ability to function without transference of general funds to the highway fund. So what we've done in P 7.0 at NCDOT, and this has been the bulk of the work, there's been all kinds of other things going on, but the bulk of the work is around getting together the P 7.0 prioritization list of projects to NCDOT for years 2024 through 2033. This project list needs to be submitted by CRTPO and all MPOs across the state to NCDOT by May, and has to be voted upon and approved by June. Otherwise, the federal government will delay project financing associated with North Carolina with all those projects listed in spot 7.0. So that's really the list and the impetus of the work. Why is this complicated? Why is this impactful to our work? Is that because in all those P 6.0, 5.0, 4.0, and 3.0, there are many outstanding projects that were not funded because of the inability for DOT to provide funding for those projects. So what they've done through this process, and we just got input from NCDOT last week regarding this process, but they've been allowed to exchange projects from P 3.0 all the way up to P 6.0 into P 7.0 to help utilize the now available funding sources for roadway projects. I know this is very complicated, but they ran out of money in this pot. They got it filled up with the general fund for every kid's bike that was bought at Christmas last year. Filled up this big pot of money and for P 7.0, and now they've said, okay, we want you to submit any old projects that you have to make sure that we can utilize the entire pool of money from the bipartisan infrastructure law and other transportation fundings from the federal government in our new budget in North Carolina. So that has a lot of the focus there for the CRTPO. I know we didn't want to go too deep into the transportation piece as was coached, but that really is the main work, and that involves several committees. The first committee is a technical coordinating committee, which looks at the deeper dive into budget allocations and also deals with impacts the bicycle pedestrian work group within CRTPO and how they provide funding prioritization for the larger board. There's a lot going on at the General Assembly that affects CRTPO's work and budgets as well. There's no less than a dozen bills that are impacting how Charlotte-Mecklenburg gets money, and the CRTPO gets money as the regional allocation organization for that. But there are lots of conversations going on. I will take a moment of personal privilege to put something on the radar for everyone, that there is a thing called toll credits. Toll credits are it's not a direct allocation of money from the federal government. It is a Excel spreadsheet allocation of money, federal dollars for transportation, but it's only eligible to states that have toll roads. So what we are reviewing now for better or worse is what NCDOT is going to do with those toll credits that they're applying for. There are two trains of thought. This is for my Commissioner Wilden to have her ears up on as well. But whether or not we want to turn those toll credits into more toll roads, or to turn those toll credits into something that is more equitable, that is spent on people who do not and are not able to use those toll roads, like sidewalks and active mobility and transit. So there's going to be a significant conversation moving forward I would imagine in the coming weeks and months at the CRTPO and the other MPOs across the state. So I went longer than I wanted to there, but I'll take any questions. But really, the bulk of the work conceptually is around our SPOT 7.0 prioritization process. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lansdale. I think we have a question from Commissioner Winiker.
Just to Commissioner Winiker, just to clarify, so this would get around that, the credit, the spreadsheet credit on toll, that wouldn't cut into the 2% ceiling that the North Carolina legislature has put on pedestrian improvements, right?
Oh, gosh, yes, that has nothing to do with that piece. So for example, if the federal government, the best way to do it is to think of it as a pie. Federal government gives you a dollar and says, okay, 20%, a slice of that pie has to be from the state match for these projects to move forward. They're allowing you to use, the state to use a portion of the federal dollars themselves and that toll credit allocation to, on the spreadsheet, pull from the federal government allocation in lieu of state match dollars. So they're able to then free up, the NCDOT is able to then free up those state match dollars for other projects. It is a spreadsheet allocation. So if we get into a situation where we can't spend down the federal dollars and the time they've given us to spend down, we're able to pull that money out as toll credits and use for the state match for projects that are shovel ready or unfunded.
Is there any way that this body can support that at CRTPO?
I think if we wanted to do an advocacy piece, a letter of recommendation or impact, statement of impact, I think it would be a fair opportunity for this body to chime in on the needs for toll credit consideration for this community that is impacted by toll roads to have a voice in how those funds are spent or allocated, I should say. Yeah.
If that is something that we would like to have before the board, what would be the time frame for that, Commissioner Lansdale, in terms of ideal delivery?
Yeah, I would say in the next 90 days would be a good opportunity. They're going to be discussing it in June in their Department of Transportation, Board of Transportation meeting that will be held here in Charlotte.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner Lansdale? Okay, so I think I have a few notes before we move to nominating committee. Speaking of Commissioner Lansdale, he and I had the opportunity to attend the help me, Reinventing Water Infrastructure and Net Positive Watershed Development in the City of Creeks, I think was the name of this discussion and panel last week. And there were a lot of light bulbs that went off, and we both were actually, I'm sorry, and I actually sat next to Commissioner Blumenthal. So the three of us were there. And we were kind of whispering throughout the presentation, like, man, we wish, Charlotte Water needs to be here to hear some of this stuff, because just some of the ideas that the speakers had and some of the discussion that was had in the panel would have been really valuable for them to hear. But for me, it helped inform some questions that we could pose to Charlotte Water. So just wanted to make note of that. In your, or accompanying your agenda today, work program item number 1. The very first thing we talked through, began to flesh out in the annual retreat back in September was this information. We agreed to host our own community events, to be more public facing. We decided to, really advocate for a way for the community to receive information around our work, our body, what we do, what we don't do. And we're finally here. I feel like I've given birth to a baby by finally. I would like to say thank you for the patience of Allison, Candace, Siobhan, Yolanda Jones, and
Kate.
Kate, thank you, who helped. He did the graphic arts for this document that you're looking at. And I would like to publicly acknowledge also Aaron Halk. He is the Director of Public Policy for the Urban Institute for UNCC, for his feedback and input. I'd like to publicly acknowledge and thank Sustain Charlotte, who would be a partner throughout this process, and tag teaming with us on the May 23rd event. This is something I'm going to say we all asked for. And so I'm going to think that at least we'd all be in attendance at these sessions. It has been Deputy County Manager Leslie Johnson was really the spark that helped get this off of the ground. I know that kind of seems crazy, but she is. So I would like to publicly thank her, Aaron Stanforth, also with county, for helping us to arrange facilities, content, things of that nature. They made some major contributions. So thank you to all of those partners. Really short and sweet. Do we have any questions around this document? Any comments? Any questions about the process? Any questions about anything? I want to hear some feedback. Commissioner Wilden.
Hello. So I was curious, do you think that we could also engage previous commissioners to also come and like talk? Because I know like for two of these, I'm completely unavailable. And so I'm just wondering, you know, could I send someone in my stead? Like a previous planning commissioner?
I would encourage that we share this with anyone who we think may be interested. But in terms of being part of a panel or leading discussion, that will be this body of what we anticipate will be 14 by the time we get here. I don't expect 14 people to be at all 4 of these events. That would be lovely. And there is absolutely the ability for us to do that. And I'm looking at Candace and Allison because they should correct me here if I'm misspeaking. And there is none. So there is no limit to the number of commissioners that may appear in these events. And I will reiterate that this is something that we agreed to do. This is our work program. This is item number 1. And again, we have a soft agenda that we will look at in executive committee. I think I shared a little bit of that 2 months ago, thinking that we'd have it on the ground back in February. But let's come together in this. And if you know of a date that you want to attend, let me know now, like a raise of hands. I want to be at event such and such. I'm going to be at all 4.
Maybe by email.
Oh,
Live.
go ahead.
I will be at the April 25th and the June 8th.
Yes, ma'am. I'll definitely be. I'll be at the 25th. April 25th.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
can we zoom in?
So that is something that we'll need to hash out in XCOM. One of the reasons why this is taking so long is that we were trying to navigate through some or figure out technology needs. Do the facilities that we're selecting have the technological infrastructure that we need to be able to stream, to have virtual attendance, things of that nature? I think that we would have to hash through that in XCOM. I will say that my preference is to have in-person attendance for the commission, but also have the ability for the public to participate virtually by way of submitting questions via Zoom or WebEx or whatever that we may use. But again, all of those details have to be fleshed out in XCOM and in consultation with staff. But again, I will reiterate that my preference for commissioners is to be in person.
I can be at more meetings than Rebecca.
I'm sorry?
I can be at more meetings than Rebecca.
Noted. Any other questions, any comments around this document? Looking forward to seeing you out on the road. There was something else. Nominating committee, that wasn't it though. It's that time of year, it's April of 2023, and every April, this body selects 3 people to take on the very important, highly classified task of nominating or selecting someone to nominate for leadership positions of this body. And again, nominating committee, those named on the nominating committee will be taking nominations via email through the 27th of April. Through the 27th of April. Today's the 10th. So through the 27th of April, nominations will be submitted to the nominating committee. Nominating committee will set a meeting time amongst the 3 of them. They will meet to discuss the submitted nominations. And in our May 8th meeting, they will then present the 2 candidates that they nominate to serve as chair and vice chair to lead this body in the next fiscal year. And the people on our nominating committee are Commissioner Gaston, Commissioner Wilden, Commissioner Lansdale. Gaston, Lansdale, Wilden, Wilden, Gaston, Lansdale, Lanston, Gaston, Wilden, Wilden, Lansdale, Gaston. By April 27th, you will submit to all 3 of those people, either someone you yourself are nominating for the chair and vice chair, or you will submit your self-nomination to those 3 people. In our May meeting, the nominating committee again will announce their selection for nominating or their nominee for chair and vice. Nominations can also be taken from the floor at that meeting. And then those who have been nominated will have an opportunity to speak at the May meeting. And in June, the vote happens. Okay. Are there any questions around that process? Everybody got the names: Lansdale, Gaston, Wilden. Gaston, Wilden, Lansdale. Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, you got anything?
We're good.
Registration is open. Charlotte Commission and Community. Thank you, Kate.
This is what we need to sell for the next 3 months.
And with that, I will entertain a motion to close.
Motion to close.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank
Seeley.
you.
Motion by Wilton, second by Sealy. All in favor, say